Welcome to the Map It Forward podcast, everyone, and welcome to episode 100 of the Map It Forward podcast. We're super stoked, made it to 100 episodes. It's been a brilliant journey to get here. We've had fabulous conversations, and this one will not disappoint, I promise you. This is our first conversation with a coffee producer from India, and it takes me great pleasure to introduce Ganga Prabhakar to the Map It Forward podcast. Welcome, Ganga.
Thank you very much, Lee. And I'm as excited to be on the podcast with you.
It is one of those little wish list things of mine to have you on the podcast because Indian coffee was never really one of those things that throughout my career that I got much of an insight into what happens on the ground for Indian coffee producers. So to actually have you here and to have a conversation with you and explore what the world of Indian coffee production is like is such a treat. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
So your farm is Agama Coffee, and you are a mostly specialty coffee farm. Is that correct?
That's right. So we have a couple of farms under Agama Coffee, which is Sri Lakshmi Estate and Bhadrapura Estate. So we essentially focus on it's essentially two terroirs, and we try out a lot more specialty. We focus more on specialty processing, single varietals, and so on that category specifically.
Awesome. Could you do me a favor? I want to sit here like in story time. Tell me about your farm.
All right. Just to give you a little background about, like you said, Indian coffee is less heard of in the world market.
Yeah.
And it's actually that's one of the reasons you can say that that motivated me to get into the business itself.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I come from a family of coffee producers. That's a long legacy of 5 generation. I'm a 5th-generation coffee producer.
What?
Yeah. So we have quite a long history with coffee, but
Yeah.
we're not really seen as much in the world market. And being of this time and generation, and when we look at outside, when we travel, and when we don't see as much of Indian coffees, it was quite. To be very honest, it's we feel that it's a lot more. It's not really got the attention that it truly deserves. So to that effect, so the great thing about Indian coffees is the whole ecosystem that the Indian coffees are produced in is very different from the rest of the world, I would like to say.
Okay.
It's grown in in a more natural ecosystem under 3-tier shade, and there's not really much of automation there.
So it's all manual labor?
It's manual labor, and there are so the ecosystem is built in such a way that it creates it brings in a lot more creates that biodiversity which enriches the soil and which keeps the soil richer, and it's shade grown coffees, so that naturally makes the coffees better in terms of quality. The one area where I feel that we truly lacked when we started off about 4.5 years back when I joined into the business was, in the processing segment. So that's exactly where it's specialty coffee really is in a very, very nascent stage in India, but I think it's a good time.
You know, I was excited to have met you before we had this conversation, even though we hadn't had a conversation. Now that I know that your like amazing entrepreneurial mind is the way that it is, I'm even more excited about this conversation. Excuse me, if that was even possible, because you have seen an opportunity, and this is, as you said, in a nascent stage, is has the potentiality in a country like India to become something that becomes a major commodity export for India if this catches on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, in terms of, I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
So so the right now it's such a moment of potentiality for India
Yeah,
with regards to the coffee export. And so if this becomes like when tech became a big thing in India
yeah,
and it ballooned very quickly, if people can see that specialty coffee in India is a viable commodity export, it could
yeah.
become something that's locally potentially something that people will start drinking en masse and one of India's big exports, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think that's where we see a lot of potential for
Mm,
Indian coffees. And um, uh, if the one thing that we see a lot that's catching up even within India, the internal consumption is what we are actually more excited about. From India being a partially as not as much coffee consuming
mm,
country like
yeah,
every other growing country
right.
isn't. The trends that are catching up, or the need for specialty coffee, or the better quality coffee is surprising. It's quite
Really?
surprising. Yeah.
So tell me what it looks like at the moment with regards to, excuse me, the average coffee consumer. I know chai is big over there, and that's how people typically get their caffeine hit. Is is coffee consumed as espresso over there, even if it's a small amount? Is the usual way that people consume it at a Starbucks? Is it brewed coffee? Is it, iced lattes or frappuccinos or whatever they call them?
um, from like you said, chai is a larger part of
Hmm.
Indian market, but now with the changing trends, uh, a lot more traveled, younger generation, which is India is a huge, a young generation
Yeah,
of a younger population, and who've traveled around and want good coffee. They've experienced good coffees elsewhere,
yeah.
and now they come back and they want that experience here. So to say the least, I think the consumption of coffee that was earlier, about let's say 5 years back,
Uh-huh.
to now, we've seen a good, I would say, a 30 to 40% increase. Um,
Wow.
in consumption. And I think that's a huge number.
That's
Uh,
huge.
that's huge. And we see, from the last year, what we see is the per capita consumption is quite low of coffee, though.
Right.
But the year-on-year growth that we're seeing is phenomenal. Um,
Wow. How were
yeah.
people drinking it? Were they drinking it uh, as batch brew coffee? Were they drinking it as espresso lattes? Do you know how it was and how it is now? Is the way they're drinking coffee changing?
See, coffee culture is fairly new in India.
Hmm.
From what used to be um, a, even in India, there's only the south part of India was more of a coffee drinking part of India,
Hmm.
and which is also mostly the lower grades and a chicory blended, if you know what I mean.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that was more dominant in this part, which is Bangalore and Karnataka, and the
Okay.
south of
Yep.
India. But now that's changing. We see a lot more from the time that we ventured into the cafe space as producers. We wanted a first-hand experience with the customers, just
Hmm.
to see how, what are we growing, or what is it that people want, and so based on that we could make the changes. And that, from where people were 4 years back to what we see them now, they drink as espresso, and not just as espresso, they want a bright espresso.
They
And
ask for that.
yeah.
Isn't that
So
wonderful?
yeah. So for us, being in the coffee industry, it's and specifically in specialty coffee, it makes us, it's sort of a feel good, I would say.
Pride, right?
Yeah.
And not just that, it sounds like from what you're saying, you had the inception of an idea to be a pioneer, an influencer with regards, and I don't mean influencer the way that it's used on Instagram. I mean an influencer in the direction that the trade is going to go and that the whole industry is going to go. You want to play a role in defining that, which is different than the people who will come after you in 10 years from now that will just open a shop and people will know to come in and ask for the things that you're defining today.
I think that's exactly what it is, because when we started off on a specialty coffee journey, we didn't know where we were heading.
Nice.
We had no idea of what we were doing, and because like I said, it was so dominated by a chicory blended, otherwise popular coffees. It was hard for us to just taste our own coffees, to just get to a point of how do we get started with just tasting it and understanding how our coffees are really doing, and how are we growing our coffees, how are we producing it, what is our quality like, because we really had to rely on somebody else to tell us how our coffees are, so we decided to take a step and say, okay, let's learn it now and let's get better from there.
Wilfred Lamastas Sr. and Wilfred Lamastas Jr. were on the podcast, excuse me, last year, and it was just so fun to hear Wilfred Lamastas Sr. give a historic account of how they started the Specialty Coffee Association of Panama. And he was saying that, we decided that we wanted Panama coffee to be really great, but we didn't know how to taste it. So we would call a friend that they had in Hawaii working at a university in coffee research. This was back in the 80s. And they would call them and he would say, you guys have to learn how to cup coffee. And he said, what's cupping coffee? And he said, well, I'm going to teach you. So every Friday, him and his group of farmer friends would get around the phone and listen to the instructions on how to cup coffee, and then just practice for the next week until the next week's meeting, where they would come together for the next lesson in how to cup coffee over the phone.
I relate to this.
And this is why I say to you, how did you learn? Tell me your story.
So I think it's really funny, but also I would say thanks. We are a generation of internet.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much content over there. And if I think pretty much everything that we know, everything that we've learned, I can say that it is through watching videos, reading up, on the internet, finding material on the internet, and then coming back and practically trying that. It's when we started roasting. So this is another funny story. When we decided, okay, this is not, getting it roasted from someone was not working out.
Right.
So we decided, okay, let's buy a small roaster, to roast it ourselves and see how it goes. So
where did you get it? Where'd you get the roaster?
My first roasting experience was with my grandfather, who's then a 98-year-old, trying to find his old
fabulous.
Roaster.
How fabulous a memory to learn roasting from a 90-year-old grandfather. Oh, that must be really special.
It was, it is, it's sort of, I mean, that's something that's there in my memory. And, so that's really a starting point for us. And then we decided that we had to get into a lot more scientific, take a scientific approach to things rather than just, putting it on a pan and rolling it out and you don't know what's happening. Uh, so it had to be better than
Well,
that.
there are people who are doing a lot worse than that, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Here in
So
America.
I know a lot of people that way.
And they're calling themselves roast masters. So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one part where we didn't want to mess up.
excellent.
Because
I'm
also,
really glad about that.
because we were the producers. We can't really blame it on the producer
Yeah,
then.
right.
So
That's awesome.
so yeah. So then we imported a small, handmade Taiwanese machine that we
Uh-huh.
learned our roasting on. And that was really a starting point for us to start learning to roast. And thanks to our, my father, who was generous enough to give me a little bit of coffee to, probably burn out as well.
This is going to be for the family to drink.
Exactly. And I must tell you, when we started roasting lighter roasted coffees, which is what the third wave coffee culture really, emphasizes on, and when we were trying to get our hands on, trying to understand the terroir and how one is different from the other, and then we had to send it out to our families and friends to try it out.
Uh-huh.
And people here were not familiar with lighter roasted coffees.
How did they
And then
respond?
it's terrible. So they sent back and said, we
No,
know
thank you.
we're family, but this is not working out. You're not going anywhere with this.
Yeah, stop now.
So,
Because this whole specialty coffee thing is just, it's not a thing the world is going to accept.
yeah. I, it's, funny enough, I think when we tried coffees, I remember trying different coffees from different roasters in the US and in Europe and Australia. So we used to carry a lot of coffees,
Uh-huh.
when we travel. And then while tasting it, we always wonder what is this, the tasting notes had to do. And,
Okay.
and I always wonder if they're just making this whole thing up, because we didn't know to taste at that
Some
point.
people are, you know that, right? Like when
Yeah.
people write tasting notes like shiny,
Yeah.
what does shiny have to do with that's I've seen that tasting note on a bag.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
later ask the person who wrote it, because we're lucky enough to have access to people that are writing these, and you call them and you
Yeah.
say, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh, we just thought it'd be funny. Well, no,
Yeah.
this is a real product. People are going to
Yeah.
be trying to understand what shiny tastes like.
Yeah.
So
No,
how did you
totally.
approach that? How did you approach learning how to understand the relationship between what you were tasting and what you should be writing on your coffee bags?
Yeah, so I think it was pretty much we spent a good year on just researching and trying to learn tasting, and before we really got into made it a product,
Yeah.
because somehow it didn't sort of we were not convinced with the idea of putting a product that we had no idea but matched a packaging of that somebody else is putting at some
Yeah,
other
wow.
part of the world. So it wasn't convincing enough for us, and because it was also a new market that we were going to test this in, and if we didn't know what we were doing, nobody else will. So yeah, we sort of tasted a lot of coffees. We roasted at least, in the beginning, 10 to 5 to 10 different types of coffees or different rows, and then trying to attempt to cup them, and then bring different roasters and then try and cup them and try to match with what they have in the tasting notes. And that's when we realized that the good roasters are good roasters for a reason. They don't put up things that are they just don't use terms like jargons.
Yeah.
just
They
to
have a
sell their
reason for
product.
using them.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I must say, when we tasted one of the African coffees, Rwandan coffees, which was extremely grapefruit-like,
Yeah.
on the pack there was grapefruit, and I keep telling the story that was a life-changing
The
moment for
moment.
me. Yeah. So then that's when I decided, okay, this is how you roast it to get something, and there's a lot of science to it, and there's a so there's a lot of learning in it, and you're never going to be best at it. It's a journey, and I think we're going to keep getting better every day.
And is that the same philosophy? I love that story. And is that the same philosophy you approach coffee producing with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've with I've seen my father, and grandfather who's growing coffee and fussing so much about quality. And there's always been a point when we as kids used to tell them, what is all this fuss about?
Huh.
Why can't you? Because you're anyway getting the same price that you're getting.
Yeah.
So what's the point in making a quality better or not? So I think there's a point that you carry. So I keep saying this a lot. There's a lot of ethics that when it comes with a legacy, there's a lot more responsibility than
Yes.
uh, you know uh, what you otherwise want to believe. You're not a beginner there. You're taking a lot of people's learning and their philosophy along with you, and that cannot be taken lightly.
Well, because you're standing on their shoulders, right?
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
It's fascinating to me to watch people like you and Wilfred Lamastas Jr. and Felipe Croce, who are the next generation of producers. So both those guys are fourth generation coffee producers. You're a
Yeah.
fifth generation coffee producer. And man, the gratitude just hit me of how lucky I am to have conversations with you guys, because you all stand on the shoulders of the families that birthed your careers, and yet you're jumping in there and saying, well, we know that they did it one way, but we're going to continue to grow the history of that knowledge and develop in conjunction with what the market wants and perhaps influence it somehow. So like Felipe, he's a Brazilian coffee farmer, and when his mother took over their farms, she decided she wanted to convert it all to organic coffee farming. And so
Oh,
that was her stamp on the whole thing. And then he came in, and he wants, now that he's coming up as the next generation of coffee producers, he's going to put his stamp in some way.
yeah.
And to watch you do that and say, well, I'm the fifth generation, I'm going to put the specialty coffee stamp on it. And there's a lot of learning from me, but I've got the history of the way that my coffee family are teaching me how to do stuff. And I'm going to grow that even further. That's a real legacy, right?
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of we are lucky to be the fifth generation coffee growers, and there's a wealth of knowledge that we've got from our our families, and that's not and we don't take it lightly. We know that comes with a lot of experience and like
Responsibility as well.
absolutely, and it takes. I constantly keep. This is a reminder of what my grandfather used to keep telling us. It takes one generation to build a certain, plantation.
Mm-hmm.
To get a plantation up to what it needs to be, it takes from an average thing to what you ideally want it to be, and to continue that to every generation is a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something, that knowledge that we've received is definitely something that's invaluable.
Gilberto, our recent episode with Gilberto, where his coffee farm he's an El Salvadorian coffee producer. It's been in his family for 135 years.
Oh.
And we spoke to him last week, and he was saying that things happen, but the responsibility, and by things we were talking about COVID-19, and they had the farm when Spanish flu hit, they had the farm when there were financial crises and all this kind of stuff. And when coffee farming is in your blood, the responsibility that you have to the generations that came before you, that built it to what it was, that was able to be handed down to you, the responsibility is enormous.
True.
Do you feel that?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't have been in this got into the coffee industry if that wasn't really resonating in what I believe in. Because in between we've all gone out for education and worked in corporates and still wanting to leave that and come back to a business otherwise is not looking so viable.
Right.
Is something I think you can't just leave it at what it is. At every generation, you need to keep working at and trying to make a better change to it, and trying different things at different points. Like you said, the Spanish flu in 1918. I'm sure I was hearing from some of our some of our growers from our community who was trying to tell us how it affected the whole,
Wow.
Yeah. So, and
what did they tell you? Do you mind sharing it with us?
Not really. So it was so how it sort of came to Bangalore with some of the soldiers that they were fighting during at that time, and then from then on how it sort of spread across other parts of the state and the rest of India as well. So it was hit quite badly. Then it did come down during the summer, and once the monsoon set in, it was said that it sort of took off again. Yeah, the second wave just took off. So people wonder if coronavirus is taking the same route, or there's a lot of speculation on that. But yeah, so that's some of the stories that we hear. And then there was, that there are good times and there are bad times in coffees, and I keep saying this when, this is a difficult time for everybody.
Yeah.
But for coffee producers, I think there has been a low time for a while now.
Because of the coffee price crisis, right?
Yeah, the whole price crisis. And I think this is where we this is where I feel sustainability is important.
Right.
The conversation about sustainability is important, because it is very important for us to build a very strong value chain. And that's the way that we're going to survive. Today, every part of that value chain is hit, not just the producers. But on the whole, I think if we all try and work together, I think that will be a better ecosystem, even otherwise.
Oh, yeah. I was talking yesterday on the podcast about the responsibility that the consumer end of the value chain has to producers.
Yeah.
We have a real responsibility right now to strengthen our businesses so that we can keep you guys in business. Yeah. This is the time when we can, for better or for worse, this is the time that we show producers that we've got their back. By making sure that we do what we need to do to get business moving. And we do it not just for ourselves, but we do it for you as well. This is at a time when, the coffee price crisis is bringing producers to their knees. Yeah. For far too long, it's been happening. This is a time when we can say to producers, we're going to do what we need to do to keep us alive and strengthen all the links through the value chain. And hopefully that will help connect us all a little bit more, because I want so much good shit to come out of this. And there is the potentiality for so much good to come out of this pandemic. At the core of all of it should be community and all of us coming together and having each other's backs and being kinder to each other and being more generous to each other, and connecting to the parts of our value chain that we haven't had the opportunity and the privilege to kind of do, like having conversations like this. There's no reason why other people can't do the same thing that I did, was reach out to you on Instagram and say, I'd love to have a conversation with you. There's no reason that the average person that doesn't have a podcast can't do the same thing, right?
Yeah. True.
Now, the reason that I reached out to you, one of the reasons, was because, one, you are so all over the touch points that people want to hear about when it comes to coffee producing. And one of those big touch points is sustainability.
Yeah.
So, and I'd love to hear how that became a focus for you and what you mean by sustainability.
Well, I think, this is right from the point when we, started, getting, before I got into the coffee industry as such. The one point for me was to understand, what is that I'm going to bring to the table? What is that value add that I am looking at adding at this point? And for me, and for me, every time it resonated that there was a lot of things that we could change. And we had a beautiful ecosystem that was designed, in terms of the Indian plantations are concerned. There's a whole it's a biodiversity hub. And there's so much that we could really, take out of that. And we really didn't have to. So currently, the way that we are growing coffee, it's extremely eco-friendly way of growing coffee, but the yields are much lower, but the quality of output is far better.
Right. So tell me a little bit about, I want to nerd out with you for a second, if that's okay. When you say that it's incredibly biodiverse, excuse me, and eco-friendly, can you explain what you mean by that? Because it sounds to me like the focus is on quality rather than yield.
True. Yeah. So this is not something that I have created, or
right,
it's not something legacy, that started. Right? Yeah. So this is something that the Indian plantation ecosystem follows. Across. Yeah. So so our coffee production happens under 3-tier shade. So there is the first
tier.
The first tier would be the temporary shade. So there is coffee shrubs, and then there is temporary shade that protects the coffee shrubs from direct sunlight.
Right.
And that can be, loped when you require when you require more sunlight.
Okay.
So that's your first tier, and your second tier would be commercial wood. Like silver oak, and so and the rest of other types of commercial wood, and the third tier would be a cover, which is of the jungle trees.
Okay.
And that's in plenty. And that's what really brings the richness and the other organisms other organisms, other wildlife, and birds, and because fruits from the jungle trees and the leaf litter, that's what's going to add to the organic matter, and that's what's going to make your soil richer. So, and in times of so the commercial woods are essentially for the times of crisis. So you have a bad crop, or you have a drought a certain year. So it's really there for you to strike that balance between on the plantation. So that's self-sustainable. And then you have the first year, like I spoke about, which is essentially there to protect the coffee shrub from, for you to, it gives you a way to trim it and leave it as much as light that it needs, the coffee shrubs needs to thrive.
So please excuse my ignorance. The fun thing about this conversation coming into it, I was like, I'm going to learn a lot about coffee production in India. And with that comes a lot of potentially stupid questions. So, excuse me, I apologize in advance if any of my questions sound silly. So is what you're saying that you're using the natural habitat and planting coffee trees in amongst the natural habitat and using that as a way to produce coffee? Is that correct?
Right.
So you're not like so you're going into the jungles and planting the trees around, planting coffee.
Not really. So this is an so that's exactly what I meant earlier when I said it takes a generation to build that kind of an ecosystem.
Oh, right.
So you there's the coffee we're not you're planting coffee in a certain way, and then there's a count of plants that we work around this sort of there's a mix of jungle trees, and there's temporary shade trees, and then there are the commercial wood. So there's a mix, and there's a combination of which we sort of bring into that mix.
And they've been grown on your coffee farms by the generations that came before you. And so when you say commercial trees, do you mean they've been grown with the intention of cutting them down to use for commercial wood?
That's right.
And then they get replanted and regrown, and then they get...
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so the coffee plantation isn't just a coffee plantation.
Right. So, and in addition to that, there's always mixed cropping that we do in terms of...
What else do you guys produce?
So this is not essentially in terms of commercial production, but just to bring that keep the biodiversity alive,
nutrients and stuff.
Exactly. So to keep the soil the way rich, and to avoiding it from direct sunlight, which is going to take away a lot from the soil. So that's where we grow a lot of fruit trees. So there's a lot of citrus, there's a lot of figs, there's avocados, and there's so depending on what terroir the plantation is on, and depending on what elevation and what thrives there. So that's the type of fruit or vegetable. Sort of we grow. That's the mix that we try to bring to the plantation.
At times like this, when what's happening with COVID-19 is happening, and people are being forced into their houses, and you can't come out, and food is, something that this is not a disease that is in any way working for poor people.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I wonder how beneficial it is for the people in your community to have all of these fruit trees and access to vegetables and things like that. Does that give a community more security at a time like this?
It does. I think there's a lot of things that we otherwise, are less aware of, I would say. Or so I think these are times when we really see that, we're really privileged to have, just be in an environment which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And just the air that we breathe, and so the whole ecosystem, the kind of food that we eat and the quality of it. And that's something that we, try to, we have a lot of families that work within the plantations, and during this time it's really tough. So we've ensured that we've got the produce. There's enough produce for the whole farms, and the ones that are not enough, we try and sort of get it to the plantation, have it delivered there, so that people don't really have to go out, and they can still sort of maintain their social distancing and get through the tough times. Yeah.
And be fed. And this is one of those times when I say that you really get to see the quality of the leadership in the people that you work for, because if they are making sure that you're at a base minimum fed and safe, excuse me, that's a true leader, right? And so to hear that you guys are making sure that the people that work for you have enough food from the fruit trees and the vegetables that you have available is really inspiring, and just exactly what we would expect from the coffee producing community to make sure that their workforce is taken care of. It's really great.
Yeah, I think that's something that the entire coffee community in India is doing, and we're really, every plantation here that we know of around, not just our own, but everybody else is taking that extra care, going that extra mile to make sure that the people who work for them are safe and they're doing fine. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What is it like with regards to where are you guys at with your harvest? Are you in the middle of it? Has it finished? Is it coming up?
Yeah, I think we are sort of lucky on that, that front. I think we were almost at the last leg of our picking when the whole,
outbreak,
the unrest, happened. But I think we're through with that, and most of the, the commodity. I know a lot of traders whose commodity is stuck, and because India exports at least 70% outside of India, and the most affected are the ones that our highest buyer, which is Italy, and the Middle East. So that's where we hear that there's a little bit of some of our traders are going through
a kink in the system. So if I understand that correctly, what you're saying is that the commercial grade coffee that Italy and the Middle East are the biggest buyers of, because their economy has been hit so hard, they're not taking that coffee.
Yeah, they're not taking the coffee, or it's in the middle of shipment, or it's stuck in shipment, or so people don't really know where they stand exactly.
Wow.
So it is a little bit of a tough time for some of the traders, because with trading there are huge volumes and they work with lesser margins, and I think that's one area of concern. Yeah.
So you guys, your family, so Agama Coffee is a group of farms, correct?
We do work with other farms to, taste their coffees, like where we started off from, in a very organic way. As there's nothing that we've we work with other farms to just try and help out and or see how we could taste coffees just the way we learned it.
Right.
Yeah, but it's essentially our own plantations as of now that
Yep.
we have coffees from, but we also work with other farms. Yeah.
And your family does commercial coffee farming as well.
Yeah.
And the way that you look into the future with this, and given what you were just saying about what's happened with commercial coffee, do you guys see an opportunity with specialty coffee when commercial coffee is finding challenges in India? Or is this still such a tiny little speck of the industry that it's still got a long way to go, the specialty coffee side of things?
Specialty coffee is very, very new in India. To be so we're in a very nascent stage. I wouldn't say that it's but from where it has come from the past few years to where it is now, the growth has been really, really quick. So it's an overwhelming growth in the specialty coffee industry.
Yep.
We see a lot more roasters coming up. We see a lot more specialty coffee shops opening up, and that's a good sign. But I don't think commercial coffees would be a replacement.
Right.
But for us, I think where we see is, or the way that I think of it is that um, it's better quality coffees
Mm-hmm.
for better pricing as well. And the
Right.
specialty category that we speak about is more of where we go an extra mile to bring those extra flavors out, or experiment with that's still a luxury market, I would say. As much as that good coffee, a good quality coffee should not be a luxury, in my opinion. But also
That's
in
very
terms of,
interesting.
yeah, so it shouldn't be, or good food for that matter.
Yeah.
I treat coffee as food. So
Yep.
good food shouldn't really be it should be accessible to us. So if we decommoditize that and sort of that's where it's becoming economically tough for the producers. If we could pull that out of the commodity market the way it is now with the price crisis and all of that, and get it to a more a sustainable system.
Yeah.
In exchange for better quality, but maybe a better pricing, but not the most expensive, or not the we find balance there. So I think
Could it
that's
be
sort of.
though? Could it be commoditized in your opinion?
I think it's a long way, but I'm not sure exactly if that can happen. But we've gotten to a specialty coffee with an intention to get ourselves out of the commodity
Right.
business. So
Yeah.
we don't really have to. And I think I see that effort on most producers. A lot of producers, I wouldn't say most, a lot of producers, there's a lot of attempt to get out of the commodity market, because that's the only way to survive, or
Yeah.
that's the only way to sort of improvise, to be probably put a label on your coffee and put it out there and tell your story, and do what you can. I see that quite a number of farms doing that now, and I think that's the way to go.
Will they find enough of a local market, do you think?
See, I think with this year especially, we did see that there was a promising trend, but we definitely don't think are in a position yet to consume all the coffees that we produce internally. It's definitely going to be a little bit of both. commercial coffees, and internal consumption is definitely going to increase, and quality is bettering for sure, because people want better coffee, better, they want something that they've seen outside, and it's we see, we look towards the West a lot, like any other developing nations, I would say. But I think, and that's definitely increasing. Yeah.
How exciting. Like, it just seems like such an era where there are lots of crises colliding, and in those kinds of things, people like you and I, entrepreneurs, look at that and see where's the opportunities and how can I fix the problems with new ideas and things like that. It sounds like there's an opportunity over the next 10 years for you to be quite influential in driving the direction that coffee consumption is defined in India amongst a certain group of people. So, the people who really do want to be quite westernized are going to want to learn how to brew V60s.
Yeah. We see that trend happening right now.
Wow.
When we started off, I remember people walking in and asking us, if we were setting up a laboratory of some kind.
Wow.
Because we had the V60s, we had the siphons, we had the, with all the alternate brewing equipments, people really thought
Where's
that
the chicory? Can I put chicory in this?
That was another thing altogether. Yeah. We had to, we had to, that was a difficult one. We had to, we had to sort of teach a market who already thought that they know everything about coffee.
Gee, I wonder what other markets like that. Oh, so it's everywhere.
Yeah, and for us, we are here from the South, and that's I remember not being a coffee drinker myself, coming from a coffee producing background, because we've all had only milk. It's a milk coffee drinking sort of nation culture. So I tried coffees. I was sort of, I was not very fond of milk. So I never tried coffee. So that's, so when I started drinking coffee without milk is when I was like, okay, this is fabulous. Why are you guys drinking it with milk?
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a whole world of an understanding for me. If I was going through this, coming from a legacy of coffee producers, then you can imagine, so
you've got to tell me about your coffee journey from that moment. So you as a coffee producer, you understand the production of coffee and growing and all of that, but you're not a coffee drinker. And then you discover this beverage that your family's growing, and it takes you on a journey that defines your career.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me about that.
So it was, like I said, so I was in a completely, different profession earlier.
What were you doing?
And I was into advertising and marketing. So that was really my line of profession, if I could.
Which is going to be very helpful for you moving forward.
It definitely has been. So I can't complain. Yeah.
It was just, a training that you needed to help you with the thing you really wanted to do in life.
Exactly. Yeah. So no complaints there. But so when I started looking into, because I really had to understand the product when so my real interest was always in producing coffee, and to be very honest, not specialty, not not anything to do with what I am doing today.
Yeah.
The extension of it rather. So not to be a roaster, not to be none of that. So it just happened. One thing led to another, because that's what you had to learn. You had to know what is the quality that you're producing, what is that you're growing, what's right from what varietal that you were growing to how one varietal to another made a difference, how processing influenced your coffee, how
Yeah, wow.
the whole thing. So, and then the only way of understanding that would be to taste your own coffee and know what it's tasting like.
Mhm.
So you're not really misled by anything, or you're not taking your buyer for what he's saying.
Yeah.
He can't just say, okay, this is what I'm paying you for this. You could always ask him why.
Yeah,
you
you're
know
not
or,
taking cues from somebody else, right?
yeah, or if somebody gave you a good feedback, you would always know how to improvise it, or
Right.
what areas you need to work on,
Right.
uh, rather than just, okay, it was good, it was not good. You're not
Okay.
taking away anything from that. So that's where it started. And then the first couple of years, we did a lot of changes in the way that we thought that we could, to better our coffees,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of taking small steps, like the there was already processes set on the plantation, from
Cupping
by my father.
processes, or did they
No, the
taste? Did
the
that, was
post
that thing?
harvest.
Sorry, go ahead.
Um, no, they weren't familiar with tasting. So the previous
Fascinating.
generation, yeah, so they weren't familiar with tasting. So that's something that we got into, and my generation, with my husband, and I, who's also my partner in business, and so we took that step to taste our own coffees and understand what it really is, because for us to carry it each time, to get another person's perspective of how the roasting should be to our own, it was a lot of difference. So we decided to roast ourselves, then taste ourselves, then, so that's really been our journey. And the way that we processed, the post harvest processing, that we realized could bring about a lot of changes. And whenever we brought a lot of coffees from when we traveled, we saw that India was never on the package of any of
No,
these.
never.
There was never. So, and we realized it's because there's one problem with what's happening with Indian coffees.
Mm-hmm.
It's not traceable. It's different coffees, different qualities of coffees
Mm-hmm.
put together to make good, bad, and ugly the same thing.
Volume.
Yeah. So, and that's what is going out to people. So they're not really getting to taste what they should be tasting. So even the first 2 years, after the first 2 years of experimentations, uh, we sent samples to different parts of the world,
Uh-huh.
telling them that this is Indian coffees. Just we would like you to taste and let us know what it is. And we also invited a lot of them to visit our farms.
Okay.
And to us, I mean, we weren't surprised. They didn't take us seriously. And I don't even think they tasted any of the coffees that we sent
Okay.
them. And however, a couple of them did visit us. I think it was. Uh, they even admitted to this, that they actually were traveling on a vacation, and they said, "Okay, let's drop by." And
Wow.
yeah, and they were surprised, and they said, they were like, they told us that they've never tasted Indian coffees as good.
How did you
So.
feel when you heard that?
Uh, I think that's what we wanted to hear, and
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly where what we were working towards. So, and we sent the coffees only when we thought that, okay, this could change somebody's opinion about Indian coffees.
Mm.
And to put Indian coffees on the map, being a fifth generation coffee producers, and not to see Indian coffee on the map is
That must hurt.
disappointing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine. So, so you start tasting coffees. You decide, I want to have a vision, and I want to see Indian coffees when I travel abroad. That sounds like what the long-term vision is for
Yeah,
you as a fifth generation
yeah.
coffee producer. You personally, when you're tasting coffees, you've gone from not drinking coffee at all to enjoying drinking a black coffee. How does that evolve over time, your personal journey with drinking coffee? Like, what's your relationship with drinking coffee now? How do you approach that?
So I think I have this, I have an understanding that coffee is, there is a certain way that everybody likes their coffees and their personal preferences. And I think that's totally fine. Now, if you're having with milk, it's totally fine because that's how you enjoy it. Whereas when we're tasting, when I really want to taste a terroir, or for me, the joy is in tasting the soil the coffee comes from. So that's what I associate with. But maybe for somebody else it's a shot of caffeine. For somebody else it would be the creamy texture that they feel in their mouth, just the joy of drinking that creamy latte. So I think to each its own. As long as you're enjoying it, it should be okay. We don't need to be so hard on people.
How do you brew?
So we are a whole lab. So
we have a lab behind us, and we just wake up every morning and decide,
every morning,
how am I going to brew my coffee today?
I'm not even kidding. And we spent a
That's
good
wonderful.
20 minutes making a pour over every morning. Some days we are, making a mocha pot. Then we are making a French press, and then we have this whole. When we're sitting in the evening and want to brew a coffee, we get into a siphon, and so we're really experimental about. Because I think the idea is that if we don't experience each of these brewing, um, to bring to experience it firsthand ourselves, I don't think that we could ever influence somebody else to, or suggest somebody else to have it one way or the other.
Do you have a favorite way of drinking?
Oh yeah.
Oh, tell me. I like knowing how people, like, we're all professionals and we all say like each to their own and whatnot, but I still do like hearing how people personally like to drink, brew their coffee. How do you like to, what's your favorite?
I think my favorite has to be a pour over. So I really enjoy a pour over. And but if I really want a quick cup of coffee, I enjoy a mocha pot. So these are my two favorites. And
do you have a preferred origin that you like to drink? That may sound like a stupid question, but I don't.
No, I think it's a very interesting one, because I think I love having different origins, and because it's also trying to understand how another producer is really, what is he putting into the whole coffee and the processing. So that it's interesting to understand that. And I really enjoy Ethiopian and Rwandan coffees. So that's among my favorite origins as well. But apart from that, I my go-to is definitely Indian coffees. So
I used to release music in my previous life, and I can't listen to a song now just to enjoy a song. I'm always listening for what software the producer used, what microphone the singer was using, what vocal techniques, what are the drums doing. Like, I can't just listen to a song and enjoy the song. Can you sit there and just enjoy a coffee? Or
no.
when you're, exactly.
No.
I absolutely relate to that.
Because I think there was this point when we when we walked into every coffee shop and we was like, what is this? What are you serving? And then we realized it's not a business to comment on coffee that day. It's not our job. So just order a hot chocolate and be fine with you.
I drink a lot of tea in cafes.
Yeah, you don't understand that, so you're fine with whatever they give you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I I keep waiting. Like, I've been out of the music business now for like 5 years. Excuse me. And I still wait for the moment when I can start to enjoy music again.
Yeah.
Just to listen to a song because I want to listen to a song. And I don't think it's going to happen. Same thing with going to a cafe and drinking a coffee. It just being able to I have envy over walking into a cafe and seeing people sit there and read a book. This was like that long time ago when people could sit in cafes and drink.
Yeah.
It was only a month ago, but it feels like it was 2 years ago that people could do that. But I used to walk into cafes and see people do that and have such envy over how they could just drink a coffee and read a book and not be sitting there thinking about the coffee that they were having. What kind of espresso were they using? And I don't think this is the right origin to pair with milk, or it would just be nice to be able to enjoy a coffee for the sake of enjoying a coffee.
Yeah.
And
It's not just a drink anymore. It's,
I know, isn't that terrible
yeah.
for us? As much as we
Definitely.
enjoy it, we don't get to have the romantic kind of experience that the average coffee drinker has with coffee. How do you feel? Go ahead.
Yeah. So that reminded me of a friend who's a chocolatier who told me, you should come taste chocolate with us. I said no. I really enjoy chocolates and I want to keep it that way. So I'm not going to mess with that.
Don't mess with my chocolate vibe. I love that. It's I wonder if this is what causes the disconnect that we have with our consumers. Because they can just appreciate coffee.
Yeah.
We can't just appreciate coffee. And I wonder if the gap between how they view coffee and we view coffee is what's causing us not to understand how to connect consumers with the rest of the value chain. Because that's the difference, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think so. Here's what we constantly keep thinking and making ourselves aware of, if I can say so, is that everybody enjoys it. So we keep saying this even with our the roastery. You discover your palate. What you like is up to you. That we just create different versions for different palettes. So our way of even product creation or blend creations, or that's mostly dependent on a journey that we really want to take them on. If you want to have a specific experience, if you would like to have it a certain way that's appealing to your palate, then I think that should be okay. And yeah, I think that's just how it's okay to be a lot more lighter on things if they enjoy it um, uh, in the most weird combinations. I think that should be okay.
That was very well said. Very politically correct. So that the Coffee Mechanics is the roasting brand. Is that the name of the cafe as well?
Yeah, that's right.
So how does it work? I mean, I'm fascinated because you're really a part of the genesis of specialty coffee in India. So at Coffee Mechanics, do you sit there and say, all right, so this is the path that we want to track for, or at least the seeds we want to plant for how specialty coffee is going to roll out in India? Or do you turn around and say, well, we're going to just see what people want and give them more of that?
No, I think when with what we've started doing, we've not really started doing thinking that, okay, people will like this and we will give them this. We've always tried to create an experience with coffee. And I think that's the journey that we want to take them on. We work with other plantations as well, and to be able to give that experience to a consumer when someone's experience, it's more than your drink, when you're taking them on an experience, so they don't know what they like, or so the idea is always to um, wow them.
Yeah.
And
How do you do that? Through
uh,
flavor or?
yeah, I think so far we've so even what we've done is we've made sure that we're never going to push things on people.
Mhm.
um, because there's always this thing of comfort that needs to be there, and it's always phases. You never probably drank whiskey for the first time and said, wow, this is what I want
Nobody
to keep
in the history
drinking.
of the world ever drank
Yeah.
whiskey and said, "This is amazing."
Yeah. So exactly. So why get them to taste a, a particular origin on a pour over on this roast? That's not necessary in my opinion. So what we do, interestingly, is that uh, all of our special beverages that we create is to take them to experience a certain notes in the most natural way that they can.
Wow.
So we don't really add in artificial flavoring in any of our coffees that we serve at the cafe.
Mhm.
Because we want them to associate with tasting notes that we're talking about, which is natural. There's no way that they're going to taste a caramel sauce in your, frappe and then expect them to taste a caramel note in their, naturally in a cup of, in a roast.
Yeah, wow.
Uh,
And
yeah.
you've taken that very deliberate approach
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yes. Yes.
And how are customers responding to that? Have you been surprised? Did they just take it up and just be like, "This is fun," or has there been resistance?
No, I think it's good and bad both.
Mhm.
Because there are a large part of the uh, l- our audience who really appreciate that approach,
Mm.
and not like we really explain to them and tell them, okay, this is what you're tasting. What you're tasting is all natural. We're not really saying that. We're just taking them through that experience. And let's say, for instance, how do you make somebody taste citrus in coffee? If you interestingly add, probably make a beverage out of uh, lime and coffee and a little bit of sweetener, that would at least get them associate with citrus and coffee. You
Right.
put the two together, or add a slice of orange in your cold brew, and they get it. They
It
know
makes it
that there is.
approachable.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not really overwhelming them. You're not really making it seem less approachable. You're
Mhm.
not, so you're easing the whole thing out for them to digest. It's not so hard to associate as an ingredient. So then take them on a journey. Okay, if you like citrus and lime, why don't you try a single estate? And why don't you try this and see what you think of it? And
Are they open to it? Are you finding, how long has the cafe been open?
We've been around for 3 years now.
So have you found people over the journey of that 3 years, have you found people that start at, let's say, a cold brew with a slice of orange
Yeah,
or lime in it? Have they graduated on to be coffee drinkers?
totally. Yeah, yeah,
Wow,
totally.
that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. We've literally got a couple of them converted to AeroPress drinkers who
What?
sort of open up their whole setup at their office and bring the whole office to the roastery, and
That's amazing.
so these things keep happening. Yeah. But it's amazing to see that excitement and to see that, positive vibe, and people willing to try something new.
You're birthing the cafe owners of the future. You realize this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there is definitely a lot of, we see it this way, if the coffee industry grows, there's space for everyone.
But your customers are the future. I mean, that's how it starts. Whenever people contact me and say, we don't have specialty coffee in our town, how do we make it happen? And I say to them, either start a coffee club or open a coffee cart and learn as a community together. And what usually happens is they do that, and then one of their customers turns around and says, I'm going to open one too. And that's how it starts building a movement. So your customers will become the cafe owners of the future, and it will be great for your business.
Absolutely. And we already see that happening, and it's really exciting to see that. We see so many roasters coming up. The whole coffee community and the energy that India is currently going through is phenomenal. It's amazing to see that kind of people brewing such coffees, people trying to try different estates, different. So it's an exciting time, and with India there's plenty of space for everybody to coexist.
So many people.
If anything, we don't want to worry about that.
Well, once it takes off, you're not going to be able to keep up. This is that time where you can be very intentional in the way that you establish the industry, so that you can make sure that the practices of the people that come after this, if the baseline is set very high, then it just grows from there.
It's also there's going to be a lot of so for us it was so being from handling everything in house, right from growing to roasting, to being to be a specialty cafe owner, so all inclusive. It's sort of, it took away a lot of us, it took away a lot of time for us to get an understanding of the whole system ourselves, and it's taken us quite some time. It's not just like you're opening I'm not going to say that just opening a specialty coffee shop is easy, but we had a lot other things as well to
the learning curve is so steep, right?
Correct. Yeah. So but it's been worth it, I would say. There's plenty, and it's amazing to see the energy that's going on, and people wanting to coming up, more roasters coming up, more coming up. So definitely a positive growth internally.
It's no one tells you how hard it's going to be, and you're kind of glad that nobody told you how hard it's going to be.
Yeah. You probably wouldn't have done it.
You would never have done it. And 100% of people that have done it agree with that statement when I say it to them. They're like, if I had have known it was going to be this hard, you couldn't have convinced me it was going to be this hard at the beginning, but had I have believed you, there's no way I would have done it.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate.
A lot of, I think when we started off on this journey, a lot of, most people from the coffee producing community itself, like, are you sure this is going to work? Because there's a lot of skepticism on that side.
That shocks me.
So it's, but you've got to try it. You've got to do it yourself, and you've given your 100%. If it didn't work, it didn't work. But
but it's working.
It is.
Here in the US, the culture of the workforce is very different to the culture of the workforce that I was born into in Australia, and where I spent most of my career as a barista for 15 years. And during that 15 years, there were times when I'd come and spend a year over here and work as a barista over here or in the UK. But Australia is the coffee culture that raised me in coffee.
Yeah.
And it's really, it still does my head in, excuse me, particularly at times like this that we're experiencing, when I see how I'm going to use a very strong word here, how disrespected our workforce is by their employers and by the public, with the way that we pay the staff of cafes and most roasters a minimum wage, which almost certainly guarantees that they're not going to be earning enough money to live on. And at a time like this, when our industry is one that is hit incredibly tough, the workforce is the one that bears the brunt of the damage, right?
Yeah.
As you're establishing a coffee industry in India, whether it be specialty or not, but coffee is on the rise over there. How are you thinking about the way that the workforce will be structured, in the sense of, so in Australia, we get paid well as baristas. We can live on that wage. It's somewhere between $25 to $30 an hour that you earn as a barista. It's a high wage with regards to, compared to here, where, you know, minimum wage nationally here is $7.25. And it's been that for a number of decades now. But every state has their minimum wage. And here in California, they're trying to get that towards $15. But in a lot of other states, it's around the $7 mark, plus tips, which adds a couple of dollars. But in America, you can't live on that. It's just not possible. How are you thinking about that when you employ people in India, and where you want to position them in the working structure of society?
I think in like I said earlier, it's a very interesting time in India, and the way baristas were earlier in a normal cafe setup is far different from what we are seeing now.
Okay.
You know, and we are basing a lot of our you know, experience that, or the skill that we hire for any of our cafes or otherwise, or any other specialty cafes as well. It's skill based, and it is and I think it is rewarded for as of now, though there is no set you know, set mark as of now, but I
As a
think
wage?
as a wage. But I think it's definitely on the positive, if you ask me. And it's a good trend that we see, that if you know, a person with skill do get paid, you know, a lot better, or and I think that's also what that's made is the baristas are taking a lot of pride in the work that they're doing, which was not really the way it was earlier.
Right.
To what, and it is seen as a certain skill rather than you know, get me a cup of coffee. Or so there's a lot of conversation that happens between, and we as people in the coffee industry, we understand that you need good people at every touch point, because coffee can go wrong in a lot of ways. You can have an amazingly produced coffee and burn the hell out of it if you don't have a good roaster, or if you you know, if it's roasted fantastically and if it's not brewed to the way it should be, then you've just, all your effort has gone down the drain. So that's something that we all understand, I think, and that's something that's seen a lot more value in. It's we are making our way is really to take it the knowledge route. How we really combine knowledge and customer service together as part of every touch point in the coffee service industry as well, in the cafes. And I think there is a positive trend to do with wages as well, as we see it as of now. It's on the rise for sure.
Are you finding that people want to work as baristas? Is there a trend towards that?
We do have the way that baristas were earlier to what they are looking at, from a good that's also a good trend that we're seeing.
Oh, cool.
Now there's also a lot more pride in what they are doing. It's not just brewing a cup of coffee. They want to understand more of what beans they're brewing, what temperature they're beans
Brewing
are going through, or what's the grind size at, and what roast is it, how much acidity is coming out, how much are you weighing, what's your brew ratio, and so the whole bunch of it. So we try and make it a lot more technical for them as well. So there is that experience that's passed on to the consumer, and at every and there is that conversation that I don't think that there is one magic formula that works for everybody. And I keep saying this a lot, is that, baristas are like bartenders. You really need to know what that person on the other side is, wanting to have that day.
Building that connection with a customer and understanding what it is that they want to brew so that you can, or they want to drink, so that you can give them the best possible experience that they can have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another way that you're creating the cafe owners of the future. Your staff will go on to be cafe owners one day, and you're mentoring that from now, right?
Yeah. We see that that enthusiasm really translates. So that's a good trend.
Do you see that there's like an association? Is there an association in India, a specialty coffee association or anything like that?
We do have a specialty coffee association. I think which was not so far as active for obvious reasons, because specialty it was far from being specialty coffees.
Okay.
Now, and so I think now everything's coming back, and people are as interested, because I think it's also how much enthusiasm that people around you put into to an organization.
Yep.
And that's the only way that it's possible for it to work, and we see that happening now. Yeah.
Do you think that there'll be competitions and like, can you see that becoming a thing in India with coffee community?
Yeah, we already have, so we hosted one of the Aeropress Championship finals.
That's awesome.
So for the first time ever in India. So that was fantastic. The energy was
Did you get
great.
A good turnout?
Yeah, we did. We surprisingly had a lot of people and trying out amazing techniques, and we were quite surprised ourselves. But it's so that's really the enthusiasm that I'm really talking about.
That's encouraging.
And that's very encouraging, and that's it's not just in for producers, or not just for roasters or cafe owners. This is just a positive trend across this. So the specialty coffee is really working. Everyone, bringing everyone up to speed.
Yeah, wow. It's such an exciting time, right? Like, you're being a part of birthing a new sector of the coffee industry in India.
Yeah.
How does that feel? For you
I
personally, as an entrepreneur, someone who came from a completely different career, what does it feel like for you I mean, do you ever project yourself 20 years into the future and look back and say, wow,
I think what is nice is that when we were just when it was an idea,
yeah,
when we were trying to venture out into with just an idea and just trying to explain it to people, and it was very frustrating to just
yes,
nobody would get it, nobody knows what we're talking about, and uh, people almost like passes off like these guys are not, it it's something that's not workable, or it's just stupid, or it's just bizarre ideas.
yep,
So I think from being there to see everybody talk about pour overs and brew ratios and grind sizes and temperature, and it's really exciting to see that. It's good to see that progress from it's uh, yeah, I think that's fabulous for us to see that in such a short period of time. We thought probably 10 years from
wow.
the time that we started, we would see that probably. And so it's always good to start off early and see how things go, and we acquaint ourselves with enough knowledge on that. But yeah, it's quite fast paced.
How has your family looked at what you've done, and what are their opinions of this whole specialty coffee thing compared to the way that they have gone about doing their approach to coffee?
I think, yeah, you know, we've definitely caught them by surprise.
I imagine.
So that's I think even so to start with our families, when we were trying to explain things to them about what we were trying to explore and see what we were trying to do, not to say they've been extremely encouraging and they've been extremely supportive with
Yeah.
whatever we've done after, because you need that kind of control and support on the plantation when you're
Yep.
trying to make a lot of changes the way you work, or which has already been set for that many years, and now you're trying to make those changes. But I think now, after many years, now they're like, okay, you're heading somewhere, I
You're
think.
onto
Is
something.
that yeah,
And
they,
does your
they
dad say, all right, you can have a little bit more land now? You can try a little bit more?
That's true. It did start with that. It just starts with, okay, this is where
The
you're
tiny little
working on.
speck.
Yeah. And that's what you're going to look at. And that's what, so, for us, it was uh, always that for us to learn what is to be done on the farm, and what the technicalities that goes through it. I wouldn't say I'm really 100% on it, but because it's something that takes a long time for you to really learn the entire process, but it's good that we're on it.
And have you had a coffee with your dad?
Yeah,
A specialty coffee that you
yeah,
got?
of course.
What does
Yeah,
he think? What does your
now
family think about it?
now we make sure that we get them to try every processing that we do, and every experiments that we run, everything. So we make them taste it, and yeah, they see the difference. And
Are they enjoying it?
yeah, they are. I think there is a strong part of them which still has that, what goes back to what they're used to.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
but regardless, I think they see what we are talking about, and the thing with what flavor profile that we're really trying to achieve, to what what acidity that we're trying to talk about, or what florals and what notes and what this and what that, so clarities and body, and so all of that. There's there's a good sort of exchange of things that they probably feel that, is good, that we know that they sort of didn't explore. Because to be very honest, I wouldn't really blame them on because it's running a plantation is a full-time job on its own. And currently that we have their support to support us on that side, we're able to do a lot more on the other side of, to continue that chain and sort of bring it to the till the cup. But otherwise, I think it's a tough job. And I think now we're able to do it with so much technology, so much support, so much, reach that we all have, which was not there earlier.
I don't know where India is at with regards to what's going on with, from a coffee producer's perspective, with what's going on with COVID-19. Are your labor forces allowed to move around at this point?
No. So what we've done is we've got pretty all the basics and all the facilities all within the plantation itself, and we have pretty much every plantation around us also are following this similar
They have their
process.
own workforce?
Yeah, they have. We all have our own workforce, and we do have some part of the workforce that's coming from outside as well. But right now, that's there's not a lot of work that's happening, and there are a lot of migrant workers that come and stay in the plantation for a while, and then they head back to their villages. Right now, I think that's the part I was telling you, that we just were at the end of the harvest, and before the whole thing just started off. So from that point, I think right now it's flowering time here. There's
but there's maintenance work to do, right?
There is there's definitely some part of the work that has slacked a little bit. But I think we will come around.
When is your next harvest?
So India is one harvest.
One harvest a year?
One harvest a year, and that would start late October, beginning November for Arabica, and goes on till December for Arabica, and then Robusta comes in mid-December to late February.
Do you anticipate that the country will be back to normal by that point, by October?
I think in that space, India's really taken a very bold step. The authorities have taken a bold step in, in having the largest shutdown ever.
Oh man, it's intense what they're doing over there.
Yeah, so it has been. I mean, if you think of the magnitude of economics of things, it is huge. But I think it was the right decision, probably. Because I think that's what is necessary for and to contain this and to bring things under control from the health perspective. I don't think that side can be compromised, and I don't think there's anything else over health for anyone.
100%.
So the way that the authorities have worked this time around is amazing. Yeah, I think that's a good.
Is the logistics in the country still working? So can trucks still come and go, and can you get coffee to ports if you need to ship it out and things like that?
No. So it's only for essential category that's working as of now, and everything else, there's agriculture, there is essentials, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing else that's that's anything outside of there's food operating, there's groceries, and those are the things that are in, but that also there's there's a lot of restrictions on how much you can go out and how much you definitely can't, we need a lot of approvals before
You can
we
venture
get out.
out.
Yeah.
So you can't get any coffee to a port now to export it?
No, not at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of our people, our friends who are into trading,
Mhm.
I think that's where they, some of their containers are sort of stuck. They don't know where, which way it's heading, because I think one of the largest importers of Indian coffee, Italy, is one of the highest hit. So I think that's also somewhere that they're trying to see how it's a very sensitive time. So I don't think there's a clear answer to anything.
Yeah, wow. Will you reassess the strategy moving forward of getting Agama coffee out into the greater world after this?
Yeah, I think till now, if it's always, our focus has always been on quality, and we've tried to keep a large part of our focus within the country. Whereas when we do want to, there has been a lot of interest from uh, different parts of the world, but I think it's also important that to be able to handle it the way that we believe that it should be in. So I think with this whole by the time that the pandemic comes to an end, and how we see how, where we stand on a larger section, I think then it's going to be that would be a good point to take a call on.
I'm so excited for you. And I'm excited for the Indian specialty coffee scene because they have you. Because you've got so many skills from outside of the coffee industry, and you've got so much richness in the wealth of knowledge that you've got inside of the coffee industry. You marry those two things together. I mean, anyone who's listening, if you haven't been to the Agama Coffee Instagram site, there's going to be the links in the show notes, but go and take a look at the very professional approach that Ganga's taking with regards to that, because it's really wonderful to see you put Indian coffee on the stage, on the world stage. And I can't tell you the last time I had Indian coffee. That's what makes me so intrigued by you and your brand and what you're doing, because you have made me want to get my hands on your coffee as quickly as I can. And I haven't tasted any Indian coffee in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I'm just really excited. I can't wait to get my hands on some of your coffee.
We will definitely make sure that it gets to you.
Can't wait once the world opens back up.
Yeah.
Who knows? Let's
That's
hope
true.
it's soon, but not before it's safe. Ganga, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it. I know it's very late in India now, where you are. So I really thank you for taking the time away from your sleep and having such a great conversation and giving me an understanding of exactly what's going on over there. We've made a commitment to document the history of how our industry around the world is experiencing this pandemic. And you've given us so much more than that. You've given us an insight into how coffee production is happening in India, and very generous with regards to the insights of 5 generations of your family's coffee farming. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely speaking to you, like always. So
I can't wait to have you back. Please come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reem.
You're welcome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. And thank you, Ganga. We'll speak soon. Bye.
Likewise. Bye-bye. See you.